Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Do you wish to wake up one day and hit the Life Reset button? Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine, helps you navigate crucial life areas, heal the past traumas, and cultivate fulfilling relationships and careers. Life Reset is your guide to a profound journey to...
Well, welcome to the Inner Voice, a Heartfelt Chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine, a psychotherapist, author, and the creator of the Awareness Integration Theory. So thrilled to have you join us today for what I promise you to be an insightful discussion. In this episode, I chat with Dr. William Rothwell. He's the president of Rothwell Associates Inc. and Rothwell Associates LLC. As he's a consultant at Korea, and he's worked over with 50 international companies and countless governments and nonprofits. He's a distinguished professor at Penn State University Park, where he has taught for 30 years. He's a co-professor in charge of an online and on-site academic program that offers a master's degree in organization development and a Ph.D. in workforce education and development with an emphasis in talent development organization. Before joining Penn State in 1993, he had over 15 years of executive level work experience in human resources, talent development, and organization development leadership in government and private sector. With a combined total of 50 years of work experience in HR, organizational development, and talent development, he has published 164 books in the human resources field. It's been an honor to have him. I've had him on my podcast in prior years and with so many of his books. And today we're actually going to be talking about revolutionizing the online learning journey, 1,500 ways to increase engagement. Why is this book important? I know that many people go to universities to get their degrees. They go back to universities for professional courses. Many of the licensed professional, they have to get their CEUs, continuing education units. I know most people online now are getting online classes for their professional development, personal development, and every single thing you could ever imagine out there. People are teaching not only locally and face-to-face, but also online in so many different languages. So whomever's creating a course, whether in university or because of their own business, this is an amazing book. And Dr. Rothwell talks about beautifully why he wrote this book, how he got here, and many of the amazing learnings that he's had through his journey that he is sharing with us, with him and his co-authors are sharing with us. So I'm sure you'll enjoy and learn from this as much as I have. Now, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any of my social media. Share your thoughts with me. I love to hear from you. Go to Foojan app and work for 32 areas of your life and really see how that you can grow every single day and enjoy your life. So without further ado, here's Dr. William Rothwell.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, 3 experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, and decrease depression. Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory has helped thousands like you get incredible life-changing results. The Foojan app gives you her evidence-based treatment in the palm of your hand. Download today.
It is such a joy to have you back on our show, Dr. William Rothwell. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for inviting me and inviting us, me and my colleagues, and we are doing two separate podcasts. I am talking about the background of the book that we've just issued, and my colleagues will be talking about in more detail the specifics, the specific techniques that are contained in the book, although there are too many of those, 1,500 of them to be exact, to cover all of those in a short podcast.
Well, it's important because the book you're referring to is revolutionizing the online learning journey. It's 1,500 ways to increase engagement. And it was interesting as I was going through the book, Dr. Rothwell, I've been teaching psychotherapists for almost 30 years. And then I've been an academic, right? I teach at Cal State Long Beach, California State University in Long Beach for the past 3 to 4 years, and have done a lot of online courses for public. And as I was going through the book, I was so excited, first of all, to name some of the things that I was just kind of figuring out and doing. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the name for it. And that's the name for it. And then I was excitedly overwhelmed by all of these different types of ways and techniques. And I got so excited. I'm like, I gotta go through this book very diligently to look at the next phase of courses, online courses I'm going to create, because there is such a wealth of information there from all different angles. So first of all, thank you and your team for putting this on, because there's so many people, not only from obviously academic, after COVID was kind of forced into this, even some of the universities that were pushing back and only having in-person classes, they were forced to go on online. But another completely a different market for this is so many professionals who are choosing to create online courses and put them up on their websites, or different types of websites, and that I think this book is amazing for that group also.
Yes, well, and I think it has implications not just for online learning, but so much business is done today, particularly meetings. Business meetings are done online. That especially began during the pandemic year of 2020. And then since then, so many people have moved into remote or work from home environments or hybrid work environments. And there's a problem not just with online learning, but also online meetings in general about how we can keep people engaged. And I wrote a different book about virtual online coaching. And that book was about the difference between the environment that we have online versus on site. When we're face to face, it's easier to engage in informal interactions. We can stop people in the hallway on the way to a meeting. We can stop people in the restroom or at the cafeteria or in the parking lot, and we can have a brief conversation with people. But when we organize our training or our business meetings online, then we tend to focus only on the work tasks, and we forget the human beings on the other end of the black box, the computer. And as a result, it becomes more formal, less informal, more stilted, And we almost have to reinvent the way we interact as human beings when we are working online. And that's what the book Virtual Coaching was about. And we took that further in this book, Revolutionizing Online Learning. So let me give you the backgrounder on how I got to this book and what we plan to do next, which I'm sure my colleagues will also cover in their podcast. But going backward, a flashback to my beginning, I teach an online and on-site graduate program. In some nations, they call that a postgraduate, master's degree and Ph.D. program in organization development and talent development. And at Penn State, we have a all online master's degree in organization development. And that program was launched in year 2014. And I've been teaching online since then. So I have nearly 11 years of work experience in teaching online. And when we initially designed that degree program, we thought we would have a global audience. And as a result, we set up the entire graduate program online as an asynchronous experience. Now that's opposed to a synchronous experience. Right now we're talking synchronously, but when people watch this podcast or listen to it at a later time, that will be an example of asynchronous learning, meaning that the delivery that they experience will be different from our live experience. So if it's a live experience we go through online, we call that synchronous. If it is disconnected and they're hearing it or participating at a later time, that's asynchronous. So we set up our entire graduate program as an asynchronous experience simply because of global time differences. And because of my 83 trips to China, my 25 trips to Malaysia, my 32 trips to Singapore, and many other countries, I was very keenly aware of time zone differences. So when it's 2 a.m. in Beijing, it's 2 p.m. on the U.S. East Coast. And this is why we designed our online learning to be asynchronous. We wanted to be able to reach a global audience in all time zones. So that forced us to do an asynchronous program. But after we launched it, we realized that an asynchronous experience is kind of boring to a learner because they don't have an opportunity to interact with the presenter. They can't pose immediate questions and get immediate answers like we can do in a face-to-face meeting. So as a result, I started to wonder, how can I make this online course more engaging to the learner? Even though it's asynchronous, how can I give them more of a feeling that it's live? So that was the original background of what led me to this project that resulted in the book that we're now discussing, Revolutionizing Online Learning. But initially, I experimented with different approaches to try to make my online learning more engaging. So the first thing I thought of was, well, why don't I combine online learning with optional face-to-face experiences? So I said to my participants, my students online, if you'd like to have a live experience, I'm happy to organize a session, and I'll do it on the Penn State campus. So initially, I set up my first on-site meetings on campus, but understand many of my students are in other countries or in other locations. So that was not exactly convenient for them. They could not participate without spending a lot of money on airfare, flying to the US and going through all the ridiculous visa requirements and all that stuff. And so I said, that isn't going to work. So then, because I do a lot of international travel, I started to tell my students when I would be in different countries. And I offered to meet with them. And in fact, I did go to dinner with people in Mexico City and in Singapore and in Kuala Lumpur and in Peru and in other locations, because that's where some of my students were located. And we were able to go to dinner with each other when I happened to be in their neighborhood. But again, that was not very good because it touched so few people. I was unable to meet with an entire class because of the geographic separation.
Yes.
So then I decided to experiment with synchronous online experiences. So I said to my students, I will do some free webinars, short 1-hour sessions. I will survey you about what time to hold those sessions because of the global time differences. But the students didn't seem to care about that. They said, well, if I'm in Beijing, if the student said, I'm in Beijing, I'm willing to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to hear your session, just because I want to be able to talk face to face, at least in a virtual format. So that was my next step, to experiment with a more engaging approach. I tried to mix asynchronous learning, and I have to tell you, our asynchronous learning on the Penn State World Campus site is very robust. We combine videos and print products where people can read things, and textbooks that they have to read from, and external videos that they can see links to. And then they're engaged with writing blogs and discussion threads and many other ways to interact. So that's already baked into the asynchronous learning management system. So I was trying to go above and beyond that by combining optional extra credit synchronous webinars in order to give students an opportunity to see me in a live format, even if we were virtual, and be able to ask me questions and interact that way. And that was very popular, and I still do that. But then I started to think, well, there's got to be other ways that I can make this learning experience more engaging. And I started to think, what if I combine case studies with role plays, and we give students actual experiences based on actual case situations that OD practitioners have lived through, actual change challenges. OD is all about managing change. So I collected some stories from real world people, and then I took their names out, disguised the names, disguised the company, created short case studies. The students would read those ahead of time. Then we would meet on a webinar format, and I would break them into teams. We'd do breakout sessions, and they would have to act out the parts of the people in the case study. They love that approach because it is more like real world experience, and it's based on real world challenges. So this is not fake, theoretically based learning. This is very practical, as close as you can get to actual hands-on experience using online methods. And it's a lot cheaper than electronic simulations. When I say the word simulation, people tend to think of video game-like experiences. Most people know those. They've seen them in arcades, video arcades. Kids play those. They'll have machine guns and they'll shoot at bad people in a video format. And if they hit somebody with a fake bullet and on the video, then the person dies. And that's very engaging. The modern generation has grown up with that kind of exciting experience available to them in their homes through different video gaming formats. And this is why a lot of students today are turned off by college education, because college has not kept up with the video game environment. It's very boring for a student to go in a class and sit down and have a professor lecture at them for an hour or maybe even 3 hours. If you start that as a professor, what happens is you have sleeping students by the end of the hour. And even worse, today, the problem for a professor is that many of the students don't even show up for class because they are so bored.
And or they're not putting their videos on. This is something that I experience is, all of them, and our school does not mandate for them to have the videos on. So usually when the videos are off and they're probably doing something else while they're listening, their attention is not quite there. And therefore it's just something that they're, in the background buzzing, but they're probably, not fully paying attention, because when you're not on video, your face is not, you could probably, your attention goes into 10 different places. So the engagement completely comes down.
You're exactly right. And I tell you what happens in a classroom. In today's environment, it's not like it was for most of us older people like myself. When I was in college, we didn't have gadgets. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have iPads. We didn't have laptop computers. And as a result, when I went to a lecture hall, I had to pull out a notebook and keep notes. Although my eyes did stray to the girls sitting in the class, and that was, and some of the girls were looking at the guys, and that was the only real distraction other than the professor. But today, that's not what happens. When you go to a classroom, the professor is competing with many devices. So the student will come in and put down their laptop, their tablet, and their cell phone, and they're surfing the web while you're trying to engage them in a classroom environment. And so we have an engagement problem both in the classroom and online. Yeah. So it isn't just online experiences that are a problem with engagement. It is also a problem in the modern classroom. So professors have to rethink the delivery process. How can we make the learning experience more engaging, more exciting, more dynamic, and more like those video games that the current generation grew up with? And so to me, with the idea of simulations, and I have a book coming out on that topic too in January, we have to we have two ways to do that. One is go the expensive route of developing video-based games and video-based simulations. Those can be very expensive because you have to hire professional actors and actresses and have scripts and do a lot of video editing, and that the costs of that mount up quickly, and you won't believe how expensive it can be to develop a video game-based format to teach a course.
Yeah, and all my experience with that, I was taking a graduate certification program at Harvard online. And I remember an evolutionary psychology course that there was a simulation that we had to go through as part of the course. One of the problem was like, at least for me, to be able to get this to operate on my computer. Half of the time it did, half of the time it didn't. And then, for some people that's exciting. And for some people, this is just like a distraction. So it's one of those things which I really liked about the book with the 1,500 ways to increase engagement, that everything might not work for everybody. If you have 20-year-olds in your class, that might be in a more exciting concept for them to be doing gaming, and they're so tech savvy that they'll get through and be done with it. And when you have about 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds in the room, they're not that tech savvy that everything shows up, and they sometimes are not getting excited about all of these because they weren't necessarily raised with these types of games since they were 8 years old or 5 years old. So it's so important to also gauge who is your audience. Is it a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old, or it's a more high level educations which are not necessarily that age?
You're exactly right, and let me make something clear though about this point. When people hear that the book has 1,500 ways to engage learners, they slap their heads and they go, oh my God, I don't have time to plug in 1,500 ways. But you're exactly right. The way the book should be looked at is as a smorgasbord, like a buffet. And when we walk into a smorgasbord or a buffet, we do not expect to eat every item on the buffet. Now, in my case, maybe I do, but most people go into a buffet thinking, I will be selective and I will only pick that which appeals to me. And the book should be looked at in exactly the same way. It's up to the instructor. They have 1,500 choices. And it's up to them to pick and choose, and maybe just a few of those approaches will jazz up and make exciting and more engaging and otherwise boring course. I mean, to me, I was once asked to teach accounting, basic accounting. No offense to the accountants out there, but I can't imagine a more boring topic to teach than basic accounting. And so how do we take a topic that puts learners to sleep the minute they hear about it and make it more engaging and exciting? And that's the point of the book. How can we give instructors many approaches, and they're designed around the different stages of when we work with a learner? What's the life cycle of our involvement with learners? It starts when they sign up for a program or a course. How do we make that process more engaging? When we have them at the very beginning of our course, how do we make them excited about the topic of the course? How do we build their anticipation so that they will show up? And this is another problem with online learning. If you do the research, you'll quickly discover that dropout rates for online learning are much higher than they are for classroom-based experiences.
Right.
Learners are quick to, some of them will actually pay the bill, or their parents will, for a college course, and then the student never shows up. And that happens in classrooms, but it actually happens more often in online formats.
Yeah.
So you have the students who attend class, they don't turn their camera on, so you don't know if they're there or not. So that's a form of ghosting. And then there are other people who sign up, they pay the money, but they never show up. And if they're put on teams to do projects like case study analysis or a simulation or something else, the team quickly discovers that this person is enrolled in the class, but they don't show up for things. And this is a big problem. So that too is one of our challenges with online learning, is how do we deal with the ghosting problem? The people who paid the money, or their parents did, and they just choose not to show up, or they turn their camera off and we don't know where they are. They could be sleeping on the keyboard. They could be in the other room going to the bathroom. We don't know if they're part of the experience or not. And we sure don't want to be giving people college degrees when we aren't sure whether they even participated.
Exactly, yeah.
So I have students that I teach both online and on site. I teach one course a week in a classroom. I teach another course entirely online. And I use different engagement strategies in each case. And it's important to do that. The modern generation, whatever you want to call it, Gen Now, or other terms that are popular for the current generation, there are two differences between them and the generations that came before. One of those is they won't do homework reading. So if a professor assigns them reading, either for an online course or for the classroom, the students won't read it. So what does an instructor do? How do you manage that? Well, you either give up on homework or you do what I do, which is give pop quizzes. That's half their grade. And if you didn't do the homework, then you will fail. And I say there's no makeup. So if you fail, you failed for good. That goes on, then that might be half your course grade is a pop quiz. So people wake up and they don't like that, but they understand the logic of it. So it does force people to take responsibility to do what they're supposed to do. Same thing with attendance. Most universities will not allow you to grade for attendance only, but they will allow you to grade for participation.
Yes.
So what I do is, again, the pop quiz works. If people are not in class, they can't take the pop quiz, and I don't give makeups. So if they're not in class and they don't have a doctor's excuse, then they failed that pop quiz, and that's half their grade.
Right. There's also, beside the college students where they have the motivation to get a degree, we also have people who are offering courses on different topics, and they'll create it either online or synchronous or asynchronous. And what they do out there is, they pay for a lot of the courses, but the same thing I think happens, that yes, you could be motivated to take a class online, not necessarily just to get a degree, but to get, continuing education units, or just for your own purposes, move on. And I've been even guilty of that, where I got very excited about taking a class. I paid thousands of dollars for that class, and then life happens, and then you're kind of, doing this, and I'll do it later, and the engagement goes down, the motivation goes down. And, you have chapters in the book about how to keep up the motivation, how to create the engagement, even when you're creating a course. And obviously for people who are designing courses on different topics for public and putting it out there, they also are very engaged. It isn't, well, what do you care? You get the money for that, and just be happy whether somebody participates or not. But it's not true, because anybody who's trying to teach something and creating a course, they really want people to utilize the learning. And plus, when somebody comes to the course and learns it, they're the one who are your best customers and referral sources, where they will go and tell other people, oh, I learned so much from this course, you've got to go and get it. So it's so important to design the course from all that perspective of not only keeping the motivation up, keeping the engagement up, keeping the excitement about the learning, and to design it in a way that they could get it. I hate exams. I've always hated exams. I suck at taking exams, especially multiple choice. So I've had this kind of aversion when I became a teacher. You know how, like, you hate something that your parents do, and you're like, when I become a parent, I'm never going to do that. So when I became the professor, I'm like, I'm never going to make him, take a final exam into this and that. And at one point, I'm like, what you just said, like, well, how are they learning? How do I know that they're learning? And just like you said, I brought up the pop quizzes, which is, I know that I hate it, but that's probably the only way that I can assure.
It doesn't need to be long. You can have 5 questions. I mean, that will test whether they did the reading or not.
Yeah.
And because you ask very easy questions that if they did the reading, they could easily answer. But if they didn't do the reading, they're clueless and they will fail. And you have to do that to establish accountability. But let me get back to how I got to the book. So I gave you the backgrounder. So then in year 2020, we were all teaching online. It was required. The university shut down, but they didn't close. So we had to move our classes to all online. Well, I was very well equipped because I'd been teaching since 2014. But then I said, well, if I'm going to teach entirely online, I have to find more engaging approaches. And what really irritated me was the mass media like CNN and other news outlets were talking about how bad it was that school children were studying from home, and you had, second graders who had to be online at learning from home. And we all know children have trouble self-disciplining themselves, and some adults do too, but children especially. And so the news media was complaining that students were getting a less effective approach at teaching if it was online. So I took issue with that. I said online learning can be just as engaging and just as effective as on-site learning if it's managed properly, but we have to manage it differently. So then I said, well, what are other professors and other instructors doing to engage learners? So that was my first step, is I put out a call to all of my Penn State colleagues, my social network, and I asked them for lists of their approaches to make learning more effective, more engaging. And they sent me some. In fact, I had one professor send me a list of 100 ways to make online learning more engaging. So then I got a lot of approaches from that initial call. Then I posted it on LinkedIn and on Facebook and asked for the same thing, and I got more resources. So then I announced that I was going to do focus groups online using Zoom, and we put out a call on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and we asked for people, volunteers, to come online random groups of professors, corporate trainers, public speakers, and we asked them to give us more approaches that they used to make online learning more effective, more engaging. And we ran, I think, 6 of those groups. I can't remember exactly, but we got a lot of approaches. So we initially started out thinking we would get a list of about 100 ways, and that would be enough to write a book. Well, after all those focus groups and after that call for information, we had hundreds of ways to make online learning more engaging. And we noticed that they tended to fall in one of 3 categories. There were approaches that would work for both online and on-site learning. So these were things that the instructor would do at different points in time that would make the experience more engaging. So those are human-based approaches. And then we noticed that there were a lot of people using specific software programs to make their learning more engaging. A simple example would be Kadoodle. If you know Kadoodle, you know it's a gaming software program that instructors can use to create very engaging online games. Well, it's just one of hundreds of existing software programs that instructors can use for building engagement. So a second category of our engagement approaches were what I call software-based. And then a third approach is a mixture of the human and the technology-based. An example of that would be, we know from the 1990s and the movement called accelerated learning. You may or may not have heard of that, but at the time it was very popular. And instructors were experimenting with different approaches to make the learning environment more exciting, like playing music and different types of music, and experimenting with how that would affect learners. One of the things that was done in the accelerated learning movement was to send advanced greetings to learners before they got to a course or to a corporate classroom. They would get an email or a letter from their instructor that would give them something to do or would simply welcome them. But today, you can use ChatGPT or other methods, other AI platforms, to do some of that for the instructor. You can simply go to an AI platform and say, write me a memo that I can email out to my students that will make them excited about the course I'm about to teach. And ChatGPT or other platforms will do that. And it takes you like 1 minute to do that. And then you can shoot it out. And the learners are very impressed that you're paying attention to them even before they arrive in the classroom or in the online event. And so 3 different ways to engage the learner: the human-based, the technology-based, and some kind of mixture. So what we're going to do going forward is set up a website. And right now we're at 1,500 ways to build engagement. We want to build a website and make this an ongoing project where we keep building on the momentum we've established and try to get way beyond 1,500 ways, again with the view in mind that we don't expect any instructor or facilitator to use all of these, but instead to be selective like we would if we went to a smorgasbord and decide which approaches would be most useful for a specific audience or a specific learning challenge that we've got to undertake. So if we're given a boring course to teach, what approaches can we use to make it more engaging for the learner? How can we teach Accounting 101 and make it exciting?
So everyone, revolutionizing the online learning journey, 1,500 ways to increase engagement. This is for all the teachers. This is for all the instructors, lecturers, people who are having just professional classes online, which they're selling their own online courses. Anyone who at any point is teaching and bringing it either online or in a class or in a group, they can definitely find their next level of efficiency and engagement in this book out of the 1,500 ways. We're coming to the close. Is there anything in 1 minute that you wanted to share? And I know we're going to have another podcast with you, with colleagues and co-authors, which we're going to go to many of the actual details of the techniques for our audience to know. But based on your the topics you wanted to share with us, is there anything that we haven't touched that you really want to share with us within last minute?
Yes, in the last minute, I would mention what I'm currently working on, which is low-cost ways to add gaming to online learning and to classroom experiences. I emphasize the word low cost. Most teachers in schools and most professors in universities do not have a budget for teaching.
Right.
In many cases, they have to pull the cash out of their own pockets if they want to do something for their students. And so low cost, but highly effective are the techniques we're trying to find and build on and make those available for instructors at the university, for teachers in schools, and for public speakers, whether they're online or on site. So I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak about this topic. I think you can tell I'm passionate about it. I believe that it is necessary, and I think we have to do it if we're going to fully engage the current generation of learners.
Absolutely.
We can't do it with yellow lecture notes. That approach isn't going to work going forward.
Absolutely. And I've found within, I've only taught in the university for 3 years, and every single term I learn more about how to shift and change. So every single class from the last year to the next, or to last term to the next, it's creating a different design because of the trial and error. And now you've given me personally a book to really go through and look at all the ways that I can learn from this book and enhance the way that I teach. Or, I'm creating online classes for therapists and public on my model, awareness integration. And I'm going to definitely utilize this book to look at all the other ways of creating. Because again, some people are doing this out of, they need a degree, but there's so many other people who are using classes, online classes for their personal growth. So
this continuing education, many occupations have required continuing education.
Yes.
And let's make that more engaging.
Exactly. How could people find you?
They can find me at my best way is by email, wjr9@psu.edu. Again, wjr9, the number 9, at psu.edu. That's probably the best way. And the book is on Amazon, so I would encourage people to check it out and buy it if they're willing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this time. And I'm always curious and excited about having you for the next books. So thank you for the time that you've allowed us.
Okay. Thank you.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.